Pastor Jabril Laverne was not just a spiritual mentor, but a true personification of faith for the people of Halifax. At the age of 45, he had been leading a Baptist church for more than 2 decades, and his word had a huge impact not only among his parishioners, but also in the entire local community. People turned to him not only for spiritual solace, but also for advice in personal matters, business issues, and sometimes even financial or legal difficulties. His path to ministry began in early childhood. Laverne's family has been devoted to preaching from generation to generation. Both his father and grandfather were preachers. Therefore, from a young age, he was aware of his vocation and was sure that one day he would take the pulpit to bring the word of the Lord to people. His sermons always left a deep mark on the hearts of his listeners. He spoke about the unshakable power of faith, the need for moral principles, and the fact that justice always prevails in the end. For him, there were no compromises in matters of truth. He did not tolerate lies, betrayal, or hypocrisy. Now standing alone in the walls of the deserted church, he was experiencing what he had previously thought impossible: bitterness of doubt and heartache. His belief in the sanctity of marriage was unshakable, and his faith in the strength of his own family seemed unbreakable, as if carved in stone. Selena Laverne was not just his wife, she was his closest friend, his support in life. For 15 years they walked together, supporting each other in everything. She actively helped in church affairs, organized charity events, and always lent a hand to those who needed it. At the age of 38, she worked as a nurse in a Halifax hospital. Responsive, attentive, always ready to help. That's how people knew her. Their marriage was a model for others. Young couples looked up to them because Jabril and Selena seemed to be the perfect team, built on trust, faith, and shared values. He would never allow even the thought of her betrayal. Never. But reality began to shatter his confidence. It was something invisible, elusive, like a premonition of a storm hanging in the air. It all started with little things. Selena was gradually pulling away. At first, he explained it away as normal fatigue. She worked at the hospital, often staying late, taking extra shifts. But it was not just her schedule. Her attitude towards him had changed. Things that used to make her laugh out loud no longer seemed funny to her. She avoided physical intimacy. Even ordinary touches became rare. Her phone became a kind of personal territory that no one had the right to violate. She kept it with her at all times, typing messages, and when he walked by, she quickly blocked the screen. The changes came gradually, but were too noticeable to ignore. After the Sunday service, he approached his wife, gently taking her hand. "Are you tired, Selena?" he asked. "A little," she answered briefly, but her hand remained tense. He felt it. He felt this invisible barrier between them, which was getting denser and denser. That same day, he decided to do her a favor and buy her favorite meal and take her to the hospital. When he approached the hospital ward where Selena worked, he overheard a fragment of a conversation between two nurses. "They were together again, I saw them." "Where this time?" "In a cafe on Bedford Highway. They were acting too close." "Are you sure? That's the pastor's wife." "Maybe so, but even pastors' wives aren't always blameless." Jabril stopped as if he were frozen. His heart was pounding furiously, and his fingers were cramping. As he stood around the corner, he realized that he could have gone out and cleared things up immediately. He could have asked. He could have demanded an explanation. He could have heard the truth right now. But he did nothing. Turning around, he left the hospital in silence, throwing away the lunch he wanted to bring her on the way. When Selena returned home that evening, he looked at her differently. As usual, she talked about work, about patience, about fatigue. But he no longer listened to her content. He listened to her intonation. Her voice sounded too calm, almost contrived evenness. As she sliced the meat on the plate, her fingers trembled slightly, but she did not notice that he was watching her every move. "How was your day?" he asked, not taking his eyes off her. She hesitated to answer, as if searching for the right words. "Hard, as always," she said quietly, looking away. He could see that she was not telling him something. She was hiding something from him. But what was it? He didn't know. The only thing he was sure of was that he would not be able to live until he knew the whole truth. That night, staying in his office at the church, he sat in the dark for a long time. Faith no longer filled his thoughts. He realized that if his suspicions were confirmed, he would have to act decisively. Returning to the past was no longer possible. Something broke inside him. This moment was the beginning of a collapse that would destroy not only his marriage, but also everything he had worked so hard to build over the years. This day began like hundreds of others, but Jabrail knew he would never be the same. Selena came home again after midnight. He heard the door creak open, heard her put her bag down silently at the entrance, and heard her stop in the hallway, hesitating whether to go to the bedroom or stay in the other room. Jabrail did not get up. He did not come to her. He did not ask where she was and with whom. He knew that in response he would hear the same explanations that would not change anything. She was late at the hospital. There were a lot of patients. The shift was longer than expected. His gaze would stare into the darkness, and his thoughts would revolve around a single truth. The trust between them was broken. But this morning he did not know that today the past would knock on his door again, and that it would change everything. Tired after a sleepless night, he went to church earlier than usual. He needed to get deeper into his work, to get away from the suspicions that were growing like weeds in his mind. When he crossed the threshold of his office, he was greeted by Deacon Abner Hale, a stern, balanced man who had served in the church since his father's time. "You have a visitor," Hale said, not taking his eyes off the open Bible. "Who is it?" Jabrail asked, not expecting anything special. "She says she's an old friend. She's waiting in the main hall." He walked toward the spacious church, and as soon as he entered, his eyes immediately found the woman standing by the stained glass window. Diane Wilkes. It had been almost 20 years since they had last met. She was his first true love, a woman with whom he shared his student years and built dreams of the future together. Smart, ambitious, self-confident, she always knew what she wanted, but fate took them in different directions. And now she stood before him, her brown eyes still burning with the same fire he remembered. "Jabrail, hello," she said, smiling lightly. "I'm back." They sat down in his office. Dion told him that after many years in Ottawa, she had returned to Halifax. She was now a lawyer, specializing in family law. "I heard that you became a well-known pastor." Her voice sounded warm, and her eyes were interested. Jabrail nodded, hiding his surprise at her unexpected arrival. "You've changed, Diona." "As have you," she replied, "but some things remain the same." Her voice hadn't changed. It was a little lower than Selena's, but it had the same softness that he could never forget. "Are you happy, Jabrail?" He froze, a simple question that threw him off balance. He should have said yes. He should have answered that his marriage was strong, that serving God brought him joy, but it would have been a lie. I don't know," he said quietly. "Sometimes I feel like I'm not living my life." Her gaze lingered on him, attentive and piercing. "So you're not the same person you used to be." She did not specify whether this was good or bad, but he knew that what she said was true. After that meeting, Jabrail began to notice something changing in him. Every time he looked at Selena, he no longer felt the unity that had once been between them. She would come home late, answer his questions briefly, without emotion, as if she were speaking mechanically. One evening, when she came into the kitchen, he asked, "Did you stay out late again?" "Yes, I had a lot of patience," she answered without even looking in his direction. "You've been very busy lately." She nodded slightly. He no longer believed her words, but he didn't want to hear another lie either. After a few days, the tension became unbearable, and he could no longer remain silent. They sat in the living room. Selena was silent, deep in thought, her eyes absent. "Are you cheating on me?" She raised her head sharply. "What?" "I'm asking if it's true or just gossip." His voice sounded calm, but there was no hesitation or doubt in it. Her face tensed. This is absurd. Why would you even ask such a thing?" She tried to sound confident, but her voice trembled slightly. She could have said that he was wrong, that it was all just his imagination, but he could see her fingers involuntarily clenching the edge of her sweater. She didn't say no right away, and it was this pause that was the most terrifying confirmation for him. That evening was the point of no return. He realized that he would never be able to look at her the same way again. But he hadn't realized that his meeting with Diana was no accident, and that everything was just beginning. The day was gloomy. Low clouds hung heavily over Halifax, and the fine, annoying rain made the city even grayer and gloomier. Jabril Laverne was sitting in his office at the church. He had an open Bible in front of him, open to the book of Psalms, but his eyes did not skim the lines. His fingers tapped automatically on the wooden surface of the desk. After the conversation with Selena a few days ago, something broke inside him. He tried to distract himself, to immerse himself in preparations for Sunday service, to find peace in his work, but his thoughts wandered far from his faith. Suddenly, his phone vibrated, forcing him back to reality. A familiar number appeared on the screen. Deacon Abner Hale. Abner was not only a member of the church council, he was a friend of his father's and had known Jabril since childhood. A man of his age, he was already in his 70s, never called without a good reason. "Hello?" Jabril answered immediately, feeling unexplainably anxious. He heard heavy breathing on the other end of the line. "Pastor, I don't even know how to say this." He clutched the phone tighter. "What's wrong?" The answer was hesitation. "You need to come to the church, right away." "I'm already here in my office." "What's wrong?" Pause. "This is serious, Jabril. We need to talk in person. But it's better if you see this for yourself. See it?" "Speak plainly, Deacon." After a tense pause, Abner finally broke his silence. "There is a video, and it has already spread among the parishioners." Jabril's chest burned like a hot coal. "What video?" Abner held his breath as if weighing his words. "Your wife, with another man." The world narrowed down to a single moment. "Are you kidding?" The words came out of his mouth almost silently. "I wish it was." The deacon's voice sounded dejected. "But it's true, Pastor. The video was sent anonymously to everyone in the church. It's unacceptable." Jabril felt his heart quicken. "Who was that man?" More silence. "Dr. Nasir Housen." The name cut through the air like a blade. Nasir Housen, a cardiologist, a member of their community, and Dion's ex-husband. His fingers gripped the phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. Nasir, someone he'd known for years, someone he trusted, the ex-husband of the woman who now reappeared in his life. Fate had played a cruel, almost cynical joke on him. While he was thinking about Dinah, while his faith and feelings were wavering in doubt, his wife had long since crossed the line beyond which there was no return. "It can't be true," he said, although he was no longer sure. "I would like to say that this is a mistake," Abner replied, "but it's not. This is reality." Many people have already seen the video. His chest tightened with anger, pain, and despair rolling in. How could this happen? "I don't know who filmed it and sent it out, but it doesn't matter anymore. The main thing is that everyone knows about it. Everyone knows." These two words pierced him like a blade. Selena betrayed not only him, she betrayed his community, his faith, the very foundation of his existence. How can he stand in the pulpit and talk about morality after that? How can he look into the eyes of those who came to him for support? How can he remain a pastor if he himself is at the center of a scandal? His fingers reflexively gripped the edge of the table. "You have to do something, Jabril." Abner's voice softened, but his insistence remained. "This is a blow to the whole church. A crisis? Number. It was not just a crisis. It was a catastrophe. His life, his ministry, his name, everything he had built over the years was now shattered. But the pain did not overwhelm him. Instead, it was replaced by another feeling. Rage. Every muscle in his body tensed, and his thoughts became razor sharp. This humiliation will not go unanswered. This betrayal cannot remain without consequences. The truth must be known to all. "I know what to do," he said in a steady, cold voice. "What exactly do you mean?" Abner asked, his voice full of anxiety. "She has to pay for what she did. Everyone will know who she really is. She will feel the same shame she threw at me." The deacon was silent. "This is not the right way, Jabril. You are a pastor. You must show strength of spirit, endurance. This is a test of your faith." "A test?" His mocking laugh sounded almost dismissive. "No, it's not a test anymore. This is a collapse. The decision was made. On Sunday, when the church is filled with people, he will show the video, and everyone will see the truth. Jabrail turned off the phone without letting Abner finish. There was no point in listening anymore. He stood up, slowly walked over to his desk, and opened his laptop. His movements were mechanical, but a storm was raging inside him. The cable, the projector, the connection, it all seemed part of a carefully thought-out ritual. This would be his speech, his last. Not forgiveness, not mercy, but the truth. He no longer thought about tomorrow. He didn't think about the consequences. His family is destroyed, his name defiled, but he could still make her feel the same way. The person he had been until recently no longer existed. This Sunday would be the day, and when the time came, everyone would know the truth. He sat in the darkness of his office, feeling the silence around him tighten like a noose. The lamp on the table cast a dim glow, but this light could not dispel the oppressive darkness that had settled in his mind. His fingers still trembled slightly after the conversation with Abner. The video had gone viral. The secret was no longer a secret. He had to act. Names spun in his head like poisonous seeds sprouting in his mind. Selena, Nasir, deception, humiliation. And then there was another thought. Diane, a woman who appeared in his life at the moment when everything around him began to fall apart. An ex-lover, Nasir's ex-wife. Did she know about this? This thought haunted him. It lodged in him like poison, gradually spreading through his veins, forcing him to act. Jabrail slowly picked up the phone, his fingers hovering over the screen before he found the number he wanted. He looked at it for a few seconds, hesitating. But hesitation could not change what had already happened. He pressed the call button. The call took a long time. Too long. He thought she wouldn't answer. But then a familiar voice came through the receiver. Jabrail? Surprise, but not dislike. Dinah, we need to talk. Her voice sounded wary. Is something wrong? He tried to speak, but felt his throat go dry. Selena, he paused briefly, gathering his strength. She cheated on me, and you have no idea with whom. Silence. A long, heavy pause, as if she already knew the answer, but needed time to digest what she had said. And then her voice, sharp as a blade. Nasir? He closed his eyes and exhaling slowly confirmed. Yes, no more questions, no surprise, just a dry, almost detached voice. Now everything becomes clear. He heard her take a deep breath. He's always been a liar, she said. No anger in her voice, just a cold, almost tired irony. But I never thought he'd go this far. I'm not going to let this go. Silence fell again on the other end of the line. And then, after a few seconds, she answered. Her voice sounded quiet but confident. And so did I. Another short pause. We will make them pay for this. The conversation with Diane was short but decisive. They did not argue about the morality of their actions. They did not ask each other if it was right. They were both filled with rage that needed to be channeled into a specific direction. The next day they met in her office. Diane Wilkes's office looked restrained and impeccable. Dark wooden furniture, shelves lined with heavy legal volumes, neatly folded documents on the desk. She sat with her fingers crossed and looked at him with an attentive, measured gaze. How far are you willing to go? Her voice was calm, but there was tension in it. I want everyone to know who they really are. He pulled out his phone and showed her the video without hesitation. She didn't blink, didn't look away, just exhaled a little. Oh, was the only word that escaped her lips. Has this already become public? Yes, many people have seen it, but I want everyone to see it. Her eyebrows rose slightly. Are you going to show it during the service? He nodded in the affirmative. Yes, on the big screen, so everyone in the church can see what they've done. Dion didn't object. Without a second thought, she nodded back, accepting his decision. Then we have to do it right. She stood up, walked over to the closet, pulled out a file of documents, and placed it on the table. I'll take care of the legal defense. We need to make sure that you can't be accused of violating privacy or defamation. He looked at her carefully, a slight look of surprise in his eyes. You're just going to agree to that? Her lips curled into an ironic smile. I am not a saint, Jabrail, and I know what it's like to be deceived. He didn't answer. There was no need to. She understood him like no one else. They acted quickly. Dion used her connections in legal circles to calculate all the possible risks. Technically, she explained, once a video is public, you can't be accused of distributing it unless you recorded it yourself. She paused, looking at him carefully. But you have to make sure it doesn't look like a personal vendetta. It has to be an expose of moral decline. How? She leaned closer. You're talking about sin. You're talking about truth, about exposing hypocrisy. And then, you just let the video speak for you. His response was a short but confident nod. The next step was to prepare everything technically. In the evening, on the eve of the Sunday service, Jabrail entered the church. With calm, confident movements, he connected his laptop to the projector, opened the desired file, and set it to start automatically. One click of a button and it would start. Standing in the empty church, he stared at the white screen hanging in front of him for a long time. Tomorrow, a video would appear on it that would change everything. Tomorrow, the community would see the truth. Perhaps he should have hesitated. Perhaps he should have felt remorse. But he didn't. He felt only a strange calmness. The morning was gray and unfriendly. A light rain drummed on the tall stained glass windows, as if warning of something imminent. In the main hall of the Halifax Baptist Church, the congregation gradually took their seats. People smiled, exchanged greetings, opened their Bibles, and looked over the service program. Little did they know that this day would remain in their memories forever. Pastor Jabrail Laverne stood in a room behind the stage, watching the crowd through a narrow slit in the door. Familiar faces, the trust in their eyes. But he knew that soon everything would change. Selena was sitting in the front row, as always. Her hands were resting calmly in her lap, her face maintaining a flat, detached expression. She had no doubt that her secret would remain hidden. Next to her was Nasir Housen, a cardiologist, a reputable doctor, a man he trusted. He was sitting up straight, looking confident. He did not suspect anything. For them, it was an ordinary Sunday morning. For him, it was the day of reckoning. Jabrail took a deep breath, straightened up, and stepped forward with determination. When he walked onto the stage and stood behind the pulpit, the room was instantly silent. He slowly looked around the room. Dear brothers and sisters, his voice was steady and confident, today we will speak about the truth. There was no hesitation or doubt in his words. Sometimes the truth hurts. It brings pain, but it also gives freedom. Today we will look into the face of what was hiding in the darkness. His gaze lingered on Selena. She was visibly tense, but her face remained unmoved. Then Nasir came next. He even smiled slightly, not yet realizing what was happening. Jabrail put his hand on the Bible. The one who lives in sin will be exposed in front of everyone. His voice grew louder, filled with power. For the Lord does not allow lies to remain in the shadows. A pause, a deep, heavy silence that hung in the air. He pressed a button. The screen behind him came to life. From the first second, it was clear. This was not a recording of a sermon. It was something completely different. The video left no room for doubt. Silence filled the room. People watched with bated breath. And then everything exploded. Chaos. The hall exploded. People screamed. Some stood up abruptly, while others turned away, not wanting to see what was happening on the screen. Oh my God, what is this? No! It's the pastor's wife. It's Dr. Housen. Someone put his hand over his mouth as if to hold back a scream. A woman in the second row sobbed, and one of the men nervously turned the pages of his Bible as if hoping to find an explanation for what he was seeing. The image on the big screen left no doubt. Selena, Nasir, their deception, their betrayal. The video lasted only a few seconds, but it was enough to destroy everything. Selena froze, her eyes widened, her face lost color. She could not believe what she was seeing. And then she screamed, sharp, almost frantic. No! No! Turn it off! She rushed forward uncontrollably, chaotically. The bench she hit overturned with a crash, and the people around her ducked to the side, not yet able to recover from the shock. She clutched her head convulsively with her hands, her fingers tangled in her hair as if trying to wrest this horror from her memory. Panic washed over her. She didn't know what to do. Cry, scream, hide, or just run away. In the end, she just ran, without thinking, without looking back, without stopping. Squeezing through the crowd, roughly pushing people, she burst out of the church, hitting her shoulder on the heavy door. Her piercing scream still echoed in the air when she disappeared. Only her shattered reputation remained in her wake. Nasir did not scream. He did not run away. He did not try to justify himself. He simply got up and started walking toward the exit. His movements were calm, detached, almost mechanical, as if all his feelings had drained out of him along with the truth. But he realized that it was over. His life here no longer existed. He walked slowly, not looking at anyone. He did not say a single word. Someone tried to stop him. "Nasir, explain. It's, it's not true, right?" He didn't even stop. He just walked away. And he never came back. Jabrail stood behind the pulpit and looked at the chaos unfolding before him. He was expecting to feel relief. He expected that his revenge would finally bring him peace. But something was wrong. Everything felt wrong. No one supported him. No one approved. There was no applause or words of agreement in the hall. Only stares, full of horror. Some hastily looked away. Others just stood in oppressive silence, not knowing what to say. And then he realized he had made a mistake. Yes, now everyone knew the truth about Selena, but they also saw the truth about him, and this truth scared them. The church he had been building for more than 2 decades was now turning away from him. The next morning after the scandal, Jabrail Laverne woke up not as a pastor. He was an outcast. His phone glowed with hundreds of unread messages. The people who had called him their spiritual mentor just yesterday were now writing something completely different. "How could you? This is disgusting. I will never come to this church again." "You are sick, Jabrail. I'm praying for you." The wave of condemnation was rolling in, and it was impossible to stop it. The church urgently convened a council. He received an official letter. The decision was made. He was removed from the ministry. "I'm sorry, Jabrail." Deacon Abner Hale's voice sounded dry. He didn't even try to meet his eyes. "After everything that happened, you can no longer be our pastor. The church cannot allow its name to be associated with such a scandal." He did not argue. There was no point. This sentence was inevitable. The house where he lived with Selena belonged to the church. He was kicked out of the house. The next morning he stood on the street holding several packages in his hands. No home, no community, no future. What he had said about love, forgiveness, mercy, none of it mattered anymore. For those who had once listened to his sermons, he had become only the one who had destroyed their faith. The scandal did not remain within the church. It broke out. Within 2 days, it was the talk of the town, not just in Halifax. Local news made a sensation out of the story. Public humiliation. Pastor exposes his wife in front of the entire congregation. Priest shows scandalous video during Sunday service. Faith, sin, and revenge. The story of Pastor Laverne's fall. His name appeared on the front pages of newspapers, and now it meant something completely different. Journalists filled the space around his life. They were waiting near the house. They were on duty near the church. They filmed reports outside the hospital where Selena worked. Cameras followed his every move, giving him no chance for silence or escape. Some people supported him, considering him a hero, saying that he had restored justice and punished treason. But most saw him as something else entirely. A man who could not control his own rage. A pastor who lost the moral right to stand behind the pulpit. His name became a meme. Videos appeared on social media mocking his sermon about truth. People cut out excerpts of his reaction after the video was shown, created jokes, and turned his fall into entertainment. His reputation was erased. His words no longer meant anything. A week passed. The scandal did not subside, but another blow was added to it. The official announcement. Selena Laverne is filing for divorce. The documents were dry and formal. Public humiliation, moral damage, destruction of reputation. Not a single word of explanation. No attempt to justify himself or apologize. For her, he was no longer a husband. He had become an enemy. She made an official statement on television. Yes, I made a mistake. Her voice was steady, her eyes confident. But no one has the right to humiliate a person like my husband did. He was a pastor. He had to set an example. Instead, he chose the path of cruelty. She did not care that she was the one who destroyed their marriage. She played the role of the victim, and Jabrail was made the sole culprit. The court took her side. The judge satisfied all her demands. She received half of all savings and full ownership of the house they once shared. He was left with nothing. Meanwhile, Nasir Housen also faced the consequences. The hospital where he worked issued an official statement. Doctor, Nasir Housen is no longer part of our staff. Patients no longer trusted him. His colleagues did not want to deal with him. The religious scandal in which he was embroiled put an end to his professional credibility. But the worst was yet to come. His medical license was in jeopardy. The ethics committee began an official review of his case. His career was ruined. His reputation was crushed. He tried to find work in other cities, submitted resumes, contacted old friends. But after such a scandal, no hospital wanted to deal with him. His family turned their backs on him. His colleagues did not answer the phone. His name became a burden. One day he just disappeared from Halifax. No one knew where he had gone, but one thing was clear: his life would never be the same again. Jabrail thought that Dion would stay by his side, that she would support him when everyone else turned away. But after the scandal, she began to pull away. One day he came to her office. She stood by the window, arms crossed over her chest. She didn't turn around when he came in. "It's gone too far, Jabrail." Her voice was cold and distant. "It's not what I wanted." My chest tightened. "I did what I had to do." She turned around sharply. "You didn't just destroy them. You destroyed yourself. And me too." He didn't know what to say. There was no point in making excuses. He realized that he was alone. Everyone had abandoned him. He had once been a respected pastor, a successful man, a man who had everything. Now he had nothing left. No home, no job, no friends. His name became synonymous with disgrace, and the worst was yet to come. In a cheap rented room, where the walls were covered with faded wallpaper and a cold wind blew through the only window, he sat on the edge of the bed. A rope lay on the table in front of him. He looked at it for a long time, as if it held the answer to all his questions. Only a month had passed, and he had already lost everything. His life was in pieces, and now it seemed to him that there was no point in moving on. Every morning he woke up with the only thought: it would be better not to wake up at all. His face appeared on TV screens, in newspapers, and on social media more than once. He was ridiculed. He was cursed. Hundreds of comments wished him to burn in hell. He no longer existed in this world. Selena took everything they had. Nasir disappeared, leaving the city, but his fall brought neither satisfaction nor relief, and Dion simply stopped answering his calls. The only thought that would not let go was, just get it over with. He slowly got out of bed, took the rope in his hands, and without hesitation began to tie a knot. His movements were clear, confident. Perhaps for the first time in the past month, he made decisions without hesitation. He pulled the chair up to the lamp and checked the knot again. No one will stop me. No one will care. His mind was detached, his thoughts cold, almost mechanical. But at the last moment, he suddenly stopped. For a second, he looked in the mirror. There was a strange man standing in front of him. Not the man he used to be. An exhausted face, empty, lifeless eyes. He took a deep breath. He raised his foot to step onto the chair. And at that moment, the silence was broken by a sharp knock on the door. "Jabrail, open the door." The voice was familiar. His mind worked slowly, as if through a thick fog. He did not immediately recognize the voice. The knocking on the door repeated, this time louder, almost threatening. "I know you're there. Open up." And then something became clear. A memory broke through the darkness. Abner Hale, the deacon, the man who had once supported him and then been among those who turned their backs on him. The one who voted for his expulsion from the church. But why is he here? "If you don't open the door, I'll kick it in." This sharp cry tore through the space around him. He suddenly realized what was happening. He slowly stepped back. He took his foot off the chair. His fingers were still trembling. "I don't want to see anyone," he said hoarsely, as if his throat was being squeezed with an iron vise. Go away, non better. The door opened with a sharp sound, and Abner stepped into the room. His eyes immediately focused on what was happening. He understood everything. The deacon's gaze immediately landed on the rope, the chair, and Jabrail's hands, which were visibly trembling. A heavy, suffocating silence fell in the room. For a few seconds they just looked at each other. And then Abner spoke, his voice quiet but unwavering. Number. You will not do this. Jabrail did not resist. He didn't have the strength to fight anymore. Not with this man, not with himself. He just sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor. Abner slowly took off his jacket, knelt down next to him, and said nothing. The silence dragged on. A minute, 2 minutes. And then finally he spoke. I know what's going through your mind right now, and I know what it's like to lose everything. Jabrail gave a small hum. You don't know anything. I do. Abner looked at him directly. I've been there too. Jabrail looked up. He hadn't expected to hear that. It was the only thing that made him surprised. Abner looked at him seriously, without pity, no fake words of support. And for the first time in all that time, Jabrail wanted to listen. I know what it's like to lose everything, Abner spoke evenly, without regret in his voice. I was once at the bottom too. I lost my family, I lost my job, and I was faced with the same choice as you are now. He was silent for a moment, looking at Jabrail's exhausted face. But then I was saved, and today I'm here to save you. His words were simple, without pathos, but they struck a chord. Jabrail felt something in him shake. Why do you want to do this? His voice sounded hoarse, almost choked. I ruined everything, because you can still rise. Silence. It was pressing, filling the entire space. And then Abner spoke again. Get up. You still have a choice. These words made him raise his head. He was standing on the edge of an abyss. His life was hanging by a thin thread. But someone was there in time. And now a new path was opening up for him. What would he choose?